On the day of Hunter and I's wedding, his little Omega found me backstage and begged me to marry him with tears in his eyes. He said that from now on I would be his wife and he would be his concubine, he would run the hotel and I would be the head of the household. He doesn't ask for status, he just wants to stay with his beloved Alpha for a long time. I wiped his tears and leaned over to whisper in his ear. Hunter has more than a dozen mistresses. Would you consider following me? I'm also an Alpha, and we only date one-on-one. Omega's eyes were red, and drops of crystal dew were dotted on his eyelashes, about to fall. Don't blame him, I shouldn't have come. I just wanted to take one last look at him. Hunter looked at me coldly. Jason, I have already agreed to marry you. You don't have to make things difficult for Mickey. Who said I was going to make things difficult for him? I walked forward with an elegant gait, put the business card covered with my pheromones into the Omega's pocket with 2 fingers, and leaned over to whisper in his ear. Hunter has more than a dozen mistresses. Would you consider following me? I have no one around me, and I'm one-on-one. There was so much information revealed in these words that the Omega froze, tears forming in his eyes. Hunter's face darkened and he warned, Jason, he's mine. Okay. I raised my hands in surrender and stepped back, looking at him with a smile. Hunter's kindness is hard to refuse, so I had to accept it with reluctance. Hunter wondered, what did you take? I bared my teeth at him, 20 million. Hunter just remembered this and a hint of annoyance flashed across his eyes. Hunter had a white moonlight named Leo. After the moonlight fell, he found more than a dozen substitutes at the same time. And I, Jason, have a habit of collecting beauties. I am a triple award-winning Alpha. In the circle, I change my partner every half a month. No matter if it is an Omega or a Beta, a high-class beauty or a boy next door, the type is never repeated. He and I are well-known top scumbags in the Beijing circle, and we are also sworn enemies. Originally, the king and the queen had never met each other until a marriage contract came out of nowhere. Hunter's grandmother was diagnosed with a blood disease, and the doctor said she would die in a year and a half at most. I don't know what was wrong with the old lady. She made a will, leaving all of her hundreds of billions of inheritance to me and Hunter, on the condition that we get married and have children. Yes, you read that right. Hunter and I, 2 alphas, got married and had children. How funny. But as soon as the news came out, my father took me back from the gathering with his friends and solemnly told me that they had neglected me for 25 years and that I now needed to make my own contribution to the family. My private life is so bad, but the reason I can still be active in the circle is only because I am a son and my father protects me. Now my dad says that if I don't agree, he will ban me. All my schedules were cancelled, the roles I had agreed to play were replaced, I withdrew from the variety show I was filming, and even my endorsements were cancelled. My agent was sent to Europe for 2 years on paid leave, and my assistant accepted a severance package of 2 million in tears, wishing me to have 2 babies in 3 years. I drove to the bar to complain to my sweetheart, Pepper, and had a few cocktails. When I paid the bill, I found that even my card was frozen, so Pepper paid for me. I lowered my noble head, followed my father's arrangements, and went to meet Hunter. Hunter's situation was no better than mine. His company has just encountered a major crisis. If he goes bankrupt, he will lose all the money to support Xiaobalian. So he put on a sour face and sat with me in the coffee shop downstairs of his company, looking at each other in confusion. I wanted to improve my relationship with him, but just as I put on a smile, he interrupted me. It's a fake marriage. We'll divorce after we get the inheritance. We won't interfere with each other during the marriage. I'll give you 5 billion. I faked a smile. Without me, this would become the charity's money. I'll take 7 and you'll take 3. No more. Make a deal. Hunter took me to meet the old lady. For some reason, the old lady liked me very much. She held my hand and looked me up and down, left and right, and even patted me on the butt. My eyebrows twitched, and Hunter gloated. The old lady asked me what I thought about the marriage, and I said I was very much looking forward to it. Then, the old lady asked with concern, "Have you decided who will bear the child?" Hans and I said in unison, "Him." After saying this, they were stunned and looked at each other. I looked at him. He had sharp eyebrows, starry eyes, a straight nose, thin lips, a stern face, and deep facial features as if they were carved by a knife or an axe. He had an extremely handsome yet extremely ruthless appearance. He looked at me, a boy with feminine appearance, a pair of bright peach blossom eyes, 2 pink lips that smiled before he spoke, and a light mole on his lower lip, which always made people feel uneasy. Hans and I said in unison again, "Him." The old lady clapped her hands and laughed, saying that he and I had a tacit understanding. Afterwards, he hinted to us in various ways that we should sort out the past, focus on our marriage, and cultivate our relationship. Then he jokingly suggested, "Whoever can't stop playing will have to give birth to the child or pay the other party 20 million yuan in compensation. Look, isn't the 20 million here?" The little Omega didn't show up during the entire wedding, but Hunter wasn't as cleanly cut off as I was. After all, he maintained his affectionate persona with every substitute, which always made people feel that there was an opportunity to take advantage of him. After the wedding, I asked Hunter for 20 million. He looked unhappy, but still reluctantly signed a check for me. He played this trick on me. Who doesn't know that his company had financial problems and couldn't cash out the 20 million? I didn't accept it and looked at him ambiguously, "Or you?" He had no choice but to call the little Omega and ask him what he thought of me. The little Omega glanced at me and said shyly, "Yes." Hunter nodded and said to me, "He and you are even." Damn this scumbag. I lowered my eyes and thought, brother, this is not my fault. Hunter plans to give me his little Omega, so that we both have someone outside and the 20 million issue will be offset. Of course this didn't work out because word got out about what he did at the wedding. His old lady came to scold him. When she arrived at the door and saw the little Omega preparing to go with the 3 of us, she was so angry that she raised her cane and beat the man out. She also forced Hunter to transfer 20 million to me. I accepted it with a smile. Hunter was so angry that his face turned red and his neck became thick. What good is he? He has just as many people outside as I do. But they've all broken up. The old lady turned around and scolded him, "You should settle down after you get married, but you're still trying to force someone into his hands. What are you thinking? Let me make it clear, if the child isn't yours, I won't acknowledge him." The old lady finished knocking and left. Hunter gave me a sidelong look and wanted to leave too. I asked him, "Where are you going?" Hunter frowned. "You have to understand, we are getting married only for my grandmother's inheritance. I have promised you to stay pure during marriage, don't ask for too much." After saying that, he strode out of the bridal chamber with a chill. On our wedding night, he left me alone in the empty room. He's smart. I took out my cell phone, added the little Omega's contact information, identified myself, asked about his well-being, and transferred 3 million to him. Even if we can't be partners, we can still be friends. I'm sorry for what happened to you today. Use the money to buy a bag, Mickey. The little Omega was very happy and sent me a lot of puppy emojis. After being humiliated by the old lady during his wedding, Hunter thought about making up for it in other ways. He didn't attend our first family dinner after we got married, so the old lady asked me to go find him. I called him, but his friend answered the phone and said Hunter was drinking and asked who I was. Hunter's voice came from the other end of the phone. "Who said I can't go out and play after I get married?" Quite happy. I smiled and told his friend that I was there to pick someone up on the old lady's orders, asked for the address, called the driver and went over. Here it comes, a classic scene. Their box must be full of Hunter's friends, and Hunter must be drinking with his lover now. How rich, no, how interesting. The second 20 million was on my mind, and I pushed open the door of the nightclub box with a smile. The box was filled with smoke. A group of richly dressed but blurry-faced men and women were sitting around, surrounding Hunter and the person in his arms like the moon surrounded by stars. I looked closely and it was still the green tea beauty Mickey. I couldn't help but sigh. "Who is this?" someone asked. He didn't know me, but the others did. "Hey, isn't this my sister-in-law?" The person who answered my call reacted and decided to find a way out for Hunter. He immediately identified me as his sister-in-law and hurriedly stood up to greet me. Sister-in-law, don't worry. We are watching Hunter. He didn't do anything." I smiled and nodded. Before he finished speaking, Hunter put his arm around the little Omega's waist and pulled him closer to him. "Your sister-in-law is here." The room suddenly became very awkward. It seems like Hunter is sure that I can't cheat him out of his money this time, so he's ready to give me a taste of his power here. But the little Omega in his arms immediately stood up and greeted me with shining eyes. "Jason, come and sit here." Hunter's face suddenly turned pale. "See, the 3 million worked." No. I smiled and shook my head at him, then looked at Hunter. "Grandma asked me to ask you to go home for dinner." Hunter pulled the little Omega back into his arms. "Can't you see I'm busy? Mickey is going to study abroad soon, and this is the last party we friends prepared for him. You're not so ignorant as to make trouble with me, are you?" The little Omega stood up again and reached out to pull his arm. "The party is over, you should go back, go back, go back." Hunter glared at the little Omega and I burst out laughing. This is a commotion. Mickey is also my friend. I walked over and sat next to the little Omega. "Il talto grandma. I'll go with you guys to see him off." Now the little Omega was looking at Hunter on his left and me on his right. He obviously felt proud and his face was glowing with joy. The rest of the people in the box had no idea what was going on and just stared at the little Omega and I talking and laughing. "What is this?" I was elegant and witty, and the little Omega was smiling sweetly, while Hunter was drinking one glass after another beside me, like a miserable person with a dark cloud over his head. He forgot that I am an alpha and a sea king. I know how to hit the target with one strike. I had already inquired about it a long time ago. This little Omega's father was a gambler and his family owed millions of dollars in loan sharks. He followed Hunter for a year. Hunter raised him, protected him, and sent him to school, but he never mentioned helping him pay off his debts. Is it because Hunter is short of those millions? Is it because Hunter is unable to discipline his father and stop him from gambling? No, it was Hunter who wanted to use this incident to control the little Omega and make him his substitute. The little Omega didn't realize it at first, but when Hunter refused to pay 20 million and used him to get rid of me, he understood. So I gave little Omega 3 million. During the time he was with Hunter, he only got some bags. Now he knows that he wants Hunter to pay for his study abroad as a breakup fee. He took the 3 million I gave him, stayed away from his unfortunate family and Hunter, finished his studies well, and lived a very good life. Now the little Omega's heart naturally leans towards me. Hunter drank a few glasses of wine and felt a little upset when he saw that the little Omega was only talking to me. His eyes flickered. Maybe he was thinking of his deceased lover. In his opinion, his lover would never smile at other men just for some small favors. The atmosphere at the party was awkward, so the group of friends made up their own excuses and soon dispersed. Hunter was drunk, and the little Omega was a little worried. He accompanied me to send Hunter back to the car and then said goodbye to me. He said thank you sincerely. I took Hunter home, briefly told the old lady what had happened, and then took him into the bedroom to look after him. He reeked of alcohol, his hair was disheveled, his clothes were open, and he fell on the bed in a rather embarrassing manner. The moonlight from outside the window shone in, making his face look somewhat pale. I lowered my head to look at the shadows cast by his eyelashes in his eye sockets, his restless eyelids, his high and unnerving nose, and his tightly pursed thin lips. Surprisingly handsome. Surprisingly ruthless. I sat down beside him and looked up at the lonely white moon in the dark blue sky. There was a rustling sound beside him, and Hunter sat up. He looked at me with burning eyes, seemingly awake and unconscious. "Is everything as you wish?" He suddenly pounced on me and pushed me down on the bed. He held the back of my head with one hand and kissed me obsessively with disordered breathing. His lips trembled against mine, and then he pushed open my teeth, trying to conquer me. His enthusiasm was a little funny, and I indulged him, wanting to see when he would react. "Leo," he slurred. I pushed him down, grabbed his arms, pulled off his tie, and tied his hands to the head of the bed. His eyes were wet and he looked at me in confusion. "I've wanted to do this for a long time." I licked my lips, staring at his toned belly revealed through his untied shirt, and reached out my hand, up and then all the way down. "You asked for it," I told him. 7. I put Hunter to bed 5, 6, 7, 8 times a night. When he woke up in the morning, he wanted to strangle me, and when I pinched his waist, he started to scream. Our agreement doesn't specify who will give birth to the child. I reasoned with him, you can't sleep with me because you're incompetent. Is it because I can't sleep? It's because I don't want to sleep. Hunter retorted, I belong to Leo completely. Haha, 17 or 18 Leos. It made me laugh. There was a lot of noise at night and everyone knew it. But the sound that came out was hoarse enough, and they didn't know who was in charge. I got dressed and prepared to get up. Hunter was afraid that he would be accused of getting up later than me, so he gritted his teeth and packed everything neatly, asking me to wait for him to leave. I wait for him? I opened the bedroom door directly and was met with the inquiring gazes of the nannies standing at the door. Young master. Grandma? The babysitter wasn't sure what to call me, so after thinking it over, she changed her words. Jason, the old lady said you can sleep a little longer if you're not feeling well. I'm not feeling unwell. I smiled and let him look at me. The nanny was horrified, and the three of them looked at Hunter, who followed me out. Master? I'm not feeling unwell either. Hunter said sullenly. The three of them looked at each other. Then, the atmosphere was stagnant and no one responded. The nannies quickly caught on and thoughtfully put cushions on every chair in front of the dining table. I sat on the cushion, looking at the red dates, red beans and brown sugar porridge in my hand, and fell into deep thought. Hunter shouldn't have done that. I looked at him standing in the garden with a pale face, listening to the old lady talking, with beads of sweat oozing from his temples. I really wanted to suggest that he go back and have a rest first. But as soon as I took 2 steps forward, he noticed my movement and gave me a sinister look. It's better to suffer in life than to save face. Seeing that I looked unhappy, the old lady said considerately, actually, you two should have had a good rest today, but Nico returned home and insisted on seeing you. The expression on Hunter's face relaxed and he unconsciously revealed a relaxed and happy smile. Nico! My heart sank. Oh no, what is this drama? Hearing a distant voice of cousin, a petite figure rushed over from not far away. Hunter turned around and subconsciously opened his arms. The figure jumped up in a cartoon-like posture, trying to throw itself into Hunter's arms amid the flying petals. This pounce might tear Hunter apart. I reacted quickly, standing between the newcomer and Hunter, and extended my arm in a friendly manner to shake his hand. Hello. The person who came was a small Omega with fair skin and delicate face. When he saw me extending my hand, he did not shake it back. He stopped and turned his big, lively eyes around twice, looking at me with a surprised expression. Who are you? I'm Jason. Oh, you're the alpha my cousin married to have children with, the little Omega said seemingly innocently. Nico. Hunter scolded, but did not deny it. The little Omega named Nico became proud and glared at me. I pulled my hand back and moved away. He happily took 2 steps at a time and jumped in front of Hunter, putting his arms around Hunter's neck. Hunter. Hunter's face turned pale because of his thin body weighing only 100 pounds. Hunter had to follow the trend and put his arms around his waist and spun him around 3 times. When he put him down, his thighs were shaking a little. You deserve it. As soon as Nico landed, he took Hunter's arm. Hunter, didn't you say you only wanted Leo? Didn't you say you would stand up to the world's gaze and never marry, and miss Leo with me? The old lady's face darkened. Nico, you are becoming more and more lawless now. Your grandmother has told us not to indulge you anymore. If you continue to say something unruly to your Hunter, you will have to go back to country F. Grandma. The old lady scolded Nico, and Nico hugged Hunter's arm and acted coquettishly. Hunter looked down at Nico with a doting look in his eyes. The atmosphere among the 3 of them was harmonious, which made me seem a little out of place. I was still confused when I saw Nico glance at me sideways, leaning his head on Hunter's arm with a look of victory. She is a straightforward little girl. I gave him a kind smile and thought, great, another 20 million. The old lady took Nico to see the rooms in the villa, and I found an opportunity to drag Hunter into the bathroom. Hunter didn't know what he was being stubborn about, and it wasn't like he was pretending to be walking very fast, but it really didn't hurt between his legs. Although I intended to impress him, I didn't want him to be so dry and swollen. He tried to hit me, but I pressed my arms on his back and pushed him against the wall. "Jason, what do you want to do?" Hunter's face turned pale. I blew hot air into his ear in an ambiguous way. "Guess." Feeling his muscles tense, my fingers skillfully and quickly pushed a painkiller suppository into him. Hunter cursed. I covered his mouth and said, "The old lady and your cousin should not have gone far. Are you sure you want to lead them all here?" Hunter's body stiffened. I twisted the pill between my fingers and circulated it around his wound twice. His thighs trembled slightly, veins on his forehead were exposed, and his fists were clenched tighter and tighter. "All right." I knew when to quit and quickly pulled out my finger before he could rush up and fight me. Hunter put on his pants and walked out of the bathroom before me, swinging the door back so hard it almost hit me in the nose. I seldom use coercion or inducement to do things like this, regardless of people's wishes, but I have to say, making Hunter so angry that he's fuming really makes me happy. Seeing Hunter walking away, I followed him with brisk steps. "Cousin, I want to live here." Nico stood in front of the master bedroom door, pointing at the large European-style bed inside, his eyebrows raised and his face proud and unrestrained. The old lady stopped him. "This is Hunter and Jason's new house. How can you be so ignorant?" Nico looked at me, raised his eyebrows, but still insisted on moving in. "This room has good lighting and ventilation. My lungs are not in good condition and need to be taken care of. What's wrong with just staying for a few days?" Hunter's face darkened. I don't know how much Hunter dotes on his cousin to make him say such words as if he was determined to win, but something just happened in this room that Hunter probably doesn't want anyone to know. "No, I'll arrange another room for you." Hunter refused. Nico's expression changed drastically. "Hunter, why are you?" He lowered his head, revealing a tearful expression. "If Leo were still here, he would definitely not let you do this to me. Leo is the best to me. He is most afraid of me getting sick, and he would definitely stay by my side and take care of me without me even asking. She looks quite cute when she looks aggrieved, if she hadn't glared at me with resentment while she spoke." Hunter was obviously touched by these words. His expression softened, but due to some unspeakable things, he still didn't let go immediately. "Nico, why don't you take another look?" I said, "This bed is quite big." "What?" Hunter looked at me puzzled. I added, "It can sleep 3 people. This time, both Hunter and Nico were stunned. "Your cousin and I can stay by your side and take care of you." I smiled and exuded a little tequila pheromone. "Cousin Nico is not in good health, and I am worried. 2 people can take better care of you than 1 person. Nico was distracted for a moment and stammered, Three people?" The old lady laughed and pulled Nico away. "You haven't seen Grandma for a long time, so just stay in the room next to Grandma. What do these young people know? Grandma has been ill for a long time and has become a doctor. She has people around her, so she is the best person to take care of you." After the old lady and Nico walked away, Hunter turned around and looked at me with contempt. "Don't try to please me this way." I blinked twice, not understanding. "No matter how much you imitate." Hunter snorted and walked past me. "You are not Leo." 11. In the next few days, my straightforward cousin Nico started to find various ways to make things difficult for me, including but not limited to. I specially made the dishes that Leo once cooked for Hunter, and reminisced with Hunter about my life with Leo at the dinner table. When the old lady was beating Hunter, he used the kite he had flown with Leo to intercept Hunter. At night, he pretended to have a nightmare and called Leo's name, crying and tricking Hunter into coming over to comfort him. Falsely accused me of breaking the crystal ball that Leo gave to Hunter. Take Hunter to search the city for the same crystal ball, awakening Hunter and Leo's sweet past along the way. Hunter was already a scumbag, and after Nico's actions, he became even crazier. He originally looked at me with only a little disdain, but now he was full of resentment, as if his white moonlight Leo died in my hands. These methods were not very clever, and most of the time I just watched Nico's mischief with joy, but I didn't expect Hunter to really fall for it. One day, when I wanted to go downstairs, I saw Nico crying with his head down in the corner of the stairs. while Hunter held Nico in his arms with a look of heartache on his face. You said you would never marry. Nico sobbed. How could you forget the past between you, me, and Leo? Hunter sighed deeply, coaxed Nico, and whispered the truth. You don't know. Hunter's family is in a very bad situation now. In the past few years, almost everything they did was at a loss, and the capital chain is almost broken. How could it be? I have to get the money from the old lady, so that the Hunter family can continue as it is now. I was too lazy to listen to what was said next. I knocked on the stair railing to give the two time to separate and then walked downstairs. I don't know if Nico believed it or not, but he became less likely to cause trouble after that, and just became a little depressed. The old lady was eager to see the results of my marriage to Hunter, and she repeatedly created opportunities for him and me to deepen our relationship, even forcing us to attend social banquets as a married couple. When the dance music started, Hunter and I were both unwilling to do the female steps, but at the same time we gritted our teeth and refused to lose, so we danced like we were fighting at the party. Our legs tripped over each other and we fell down in full view of everyone, kissing each other like in an idol drama. Nico immediately went crazy, yelled at Hunter, "You have forgotten our past," and ran out of the banquet hall. I found him by the swimming pool and he gave me another classic scene. He said to me viciously, "Do you believe that my cousin will save me but not you?" The moment Hunter appeared in his sight, he pulled me into the swimming pool. Water splashed everywhere and he shouted, "Cousin, help! Help!" Hunter ran over anxiously, but the floor next to the swimming pool was slippery and he lost his balance, fell in the splits and rolled to the ground in pain. Nico took several gulps of water and sank into the water in panic. I swam leisurely to him in the swimming pool and pulled him out of the water. It was a moonlit night that day. When Nico, who had escaped death, opened his eyes, he saw me, my body bathed in moonlight, my eyes sparkling, and my facial features as seductive as a mermaid. The water dripped from my hair, flowing over my jaw, collarbone, and sliding onto my well-trained chest muscles and lower abdomen. My hot body pressed against his skin in the cold water. Nico lost consciousness again and had a nosebleed. His fingers trembled slightly and touched my lips. I chuckled. "Are you interested in me?" Hunter's roar rang out from behind me. "Nico, what are you doing?" Nico came to his senses at this time and his face turned pale. Hunter was furious and left Nico and me behind, limping towards the banquet hall. Nico climbed out of the swimming pool and hurriedly chased after him. Cousin, you misunderstood. E.D.T. I got up from the water, wrung the water out of my clothes, and followed leisurely. Then Nico was heard grabbing Hunter and confessing his feelings in front of the old lady and several other guests who had also come over. "Cousin, I don't like him. The one I like is you. I like you. I have always liked you." Hunter looked up and saw me, and his lips suddenly trembled. "Oh." I put my hands in my pants pockets, smiled and leaned against the door. "Thank you, Hunter. Cash or transfer?" Hunter probably didn't have much money because he immediately rejected Nico's advances. "Nico, you're my cousin, and Leo treats you as his brother too." "No, you definitely have me in your heart." Nico Owen shook his head. "I won't take Leo's place. I just want to remember Leo with you. You and I are the only ones who remember him in this world." The angle was so strange that Hunter didn't know how to react. Nico rushed forward and hugged Hunter's neck without losing any time. Hunter stepped back and slipped and fell. Nico bumped into his arms and kissed him squarely on the lips. "Oh my, this!" the guests exclaimed. Grandma Hunter turned pale and fainted from anger. The old lady was admitted to the hospital, but fortunately nothing serious happened. Hunter and Nico knelt in front of the bed. The old lady held my hand with red eyes. Owen said that it was a misfortune for the family and I had been wronged. I don't know if it's because of the cold water, but my nose is dry and my chest feels inexplicably anxious. But I still smiled and responded, "I don't feel wronged. Isn't there compensation?" So the old lady ordered Hunter to send Nico away within 2 days and pay me $40 million as an apology. Hunter was horrified. He didn't even want to pay $20 million, let alone $40 million. "Grandma, this is none of my business. It's Nico himself. The old lady interrupted him. If you hadn't been entangled with him and caused him to misunderstand, why would he come and tangle with you after you got married? You have to pay for the trouble you caused, and Nico has to pay for it too. Hunter gritted his teeth and suddenly glared at me. I'm so wronged. I didn't do anything this time. Nico was not convinced. Grandma, why do you insist on letting my cousin marry Jason? Can't my cousin and I inherit your estate together? The old lady was so angry that she almost turned her back. You also know that he is your cousin. You are related by blood. Nico said stubbornly, it's 3 generations old. The old lady picked up the water cup beside her and threw it in Nico's direction. Look at how useless you are. How can I face your grandmother in the future? Nico dodged the cup of water, but was still frightened and sobbed. Amidst the chaos, Hunter suddenly regained his wits and calmly asked the old lady the crucial question, why him? The old lady paused, looked at me, and then sighed. She told Hunter a story from the past. It turned out that Hunter's family had almost been wiped out 60 years ago, and it was my grandfather who managed to save Hunter's family by using his connections, running around, and giving away half of his fortune. The old lady was grateful to my family and wanted to marry into our family, but she didn't expect that the next generation would be all alphas, and the next generation would also be all alphas. My days are numbered, so I want to fulfill my wish. The old lady looked at Hunter. You can pursue what you want, and don't worry about an old woman like me. I will donate the inheritance to accumulate merits, so that I can live more comfortably in my next life. Nico pulled Hunter after hearing this. Cousin, we don't want the money. Let's take care of Leo together. Leo won't want you to be with someone else. Hunter's face was full of struggle. He knelt on the ground and didn't move. Cousin. Nico, please go away. I can't see you anymore. Yes, that's 100 billion. 15. After leaving the ward, Hunter said to me coldly, don't think that everything will go as you wish. I nodded and didn't argue. Nico wanted to argue with Hunter, but Hunter was angry that he had caused such a disaster, so he left him and walked away quickly. Seeing Hunter's resolute back, Nico finally shed tears. I stood behind him and handed him the handkerchief at the right time. When Nico saw my face, he remembered that he was distracted by his misbehavior in the swimming pool, so he confessed to Hunter without caring about anything else and threw his handkerchief to the ground in anger. Don't think you've won. My cousin has been with Leo for 4 years, and no one can replace him in my cousin's heart. He is the one my cousin loves the most and the only one he has ever loved. The anxiety is getting stronger. The uncontrollable viciousness crawled up silently from the edge of my ribs like a group of ants, densely covering my heart. I chuckled. Then why don't they get married? Nico was stunned. Hunter is 27 years old this year, so there is no problem of being too old to get married. His parents died young, so there is no obstacle between him and Leo. I added, for years. If they move fast, the child will be old enough to help with cooking. Hunter loves him so much, why don't they get married? Nico didn't say anything, as if he was lost in his memories. His hands clenched and unclenched unconsciously. He wanted to say something several times but stopped himself, and in the end he didn't utter a single word. The moonlight was cold and shone through the windows of the hospital corridor, spreading on the gray ground, stretching out 2 twisted and thin shadows, making the people under the moon look cold and dull, like a bad print. I said, you've actually thought about it, right? Hunter loves Leo, but that doesn't stop him from thinking Leo is not good enough for him. Hunter looked down on Leo, and even Nico looked down on Leo, so Nico didn't care, so Nico could use Leo to deal with the new people around Hunter. Nico gritted his teeth, obviously very unwilling. I exposed him. Even Bai Yueguang is like this, how likely do you think it is that you will stay with him by reflecting the afterglow of the moonlight? 16. The old lady left Nico in the hospital and I returned to the villa. Hunter was sitting on the sofa in the living room drinking. When I went in, there were many empty bottles piled up at his feet. He drank so much, I suspected he was trying to avoid me asking him for 40 million. So I walked over and sat next to him. Give me money. Before he could finish his words, Hunter picked up his phone and started tapping away, then threw the phone at me. I picked up my phone and took a look. Insufficient balance. It made me laugh. Defeating. I grabbed Hunter's ankles. Hunter's body was slack, with one leg draped over the sofa. He raised his eyes, his eyelashes fluttering slightly, and looked at me with a dazed look. The anxious feeling in my chest became all too real. While waiting for his reaction, I suddenly wanted to lick and kiss his eyelashes with my tongue. Hunter looked at me, then closed his eyes and fell asleep on the sofa. "Are you drunk?" I asked him. He chuckled. "How funny." "Oh, not drunk." I leaned into the sofa cushions, my back creaking against the leather. Hunter covered his face with his arms, but didn't try to drive me away, and started to talk. "Our ridiculous marriage is just to fulfill the old lady's ridiculous wish. But I actually married you instead of Leo. Leo and I lived together abroad for 4 years. The time I spent with him was the happiest time of my life. He was a very kind and considerate person. He was born in the poorest neighborhood, but he had a clean heart and a strong character. He didn't know my true identity and only treated me as an ordinary international student. I didn't deliberately lie to him. I just gave some money to a beggar in the center of the square and borrowed his guitar to play with. Leo passed by there and thought I was a pauper, so he gave me $100 and a bouquet of flowers. We lived in a very small house with no living room and only one bed. There was no air conditioning, so we hugged each other to keep warm in the winter. When we didn't have enough money to live on, we would buy some cheap ingredients and cook our own meals. He would work several jobs to give me birthday presents, and would happily accept the roses I folded for him out of paper. When Nico came to see me, he also did his best and treated Nico like his own brother. I should have married him, I should have. Hunter's voice gradually became softer, and his hand fell from the sofa. The moonlight reflected the part of his wrist that was exposed outside his sleeve. The wrist bones were clear, and the whiteness was bloodless. Looking down, the fingers were slender, and the shadows between the fingers were eye-catching. I took Hunter's hand and put it next to my nose. Alcohol. Cold spring smell. Pheromones. The heat that I had been suppressing suddenly burned up, my eyes turned red, and the glands in my neck began to throb. I asked Hunter softly, "Do you still remember Leo's name?" I don't know how long it took, so long that I thought time had stopped, and finally a sound of dream talk was heard in the air. "Leo." 17. "Leo is my brother." Hunter booked a flight for Nico to return to Country F. Nico had a big argument with Hunter, but Hunter refused to give in. Nico was very uncomfortable with his cousin's sudden change in attitude. He was unwilling but powerless to change the situation. He had to pretend to be submissive and said that Hunter must personally send him to the plane. Hunter was afraid of the 40 million and insisted that I ride with him to the airport that day. The driver and bodyguard were in the front seat, Hunter and I were in the back seat, and Nico, who looked worried, sat between us. "Why did you let him come?" Nico curled his fingers in dissatisfaction and put his hand on Hunter's arm. After being taught a lesson by the old lady, he became more restrained and not as arrogant as when he first came, but his behavior remained. As long as Hunter was around, he would subconsciously lean towards his cousin. However, the window paper of Hunter being his cousin had been broken by him, and all his physical contact now seemed to have some ulterior motives. Hunter brushed Nico's hand off his arm. "He's your cousin's wife, of course he can come." I didn't agree or disagree with the name of cousin's wife. Nico was frustrated, drooped his shoulders and huddled into the back seat cushion. Everything seemed peaceful up here until I noticed that there were fewer buildings and more trees outside the window. That was not the way to the airport. I looked at Hunter in astonishment, and he looked at me in confusion. It was obvious that this was not arranged by him. Just as I was about to say something, the bodyguard in the front seat shouted, "Don't move." One on the left and one on the right, 2 guns were pointed at Hunter and me. 19. Things took a turn for the worse. The car stopped in the wilderness. Under the threat of 2 guns, the driver tied me, Hunter and Nico with ropes and took us into an abandoned building. I don't know if the 2 men were seeking revenge or money, so they didn't show any resistance. Hunter was very disgusted by this, and he was punched twice for trying to push. I told him that if he acted rashly now, it would probably provoke the gangsters. No matter how strong the alpha's physique is, It is just an ordinary flesh and blood body, and it can't withstand a few rotating, penetrating, and explosive bullets. Nico's face was pale and he was sweating. Hunter had to comfort him, saying that it was just a kidnapping and it was not as bad as he thought. We were taken to the rooftop, bodyguards were looking at us with guns, and the driver was on the phone, apparently contacting the old lady from Hunter's family. 300 million. I want cash, non-consecutive digits. Please prepare it for me before 3 p.m. Do not call the police. I sneered. You probably don't know how big a pile of 300 million cash is? Before I could finish my words, the bodyguard punched me in the stomach. I bent over in pain and hissed a few times. Nico's shoulders trembled in fear. Hunter frowned and took 2 steps back, putting some distance between him and me. Dog stuff. Sure enough, the driver on the other end of the phone also mentioned this issue, and he replied fiercely, I don't care how you plan to raise the money, I must see the money by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know what was said on the other end. After listening, the driver said, okay, and hung up the phone. The wind was so strong on the rooftop that I could hardly stand. Hunter was protecting Nico, far away from me, and I felt like a cold wind was blowing into my chest, empty and desolate. The driver began to glance between Nico and me with a rather sinister expression. Nico shrank back and hid behind Hunter. Hunter straightened his chest and asked coldly, What do you want to do? The driver walked up, pulled out a sharp knife, and pressed it against Hunter's chest. Hunter was horrified. But the driver simply cut the rope around Hunter. The old lady said that there is not enough time. She can pay 200 million first and let me release 2 people. Facing the doubtful Hunter, the driver said maliciously, Hunter, you decide who to take away. 20. This plot was so classic that I couldn't even laugh and just looked at Nico. Nico and I made eye contact and he immediately lowered his head guiltily. This stupid guy, how could Hunter choose him? I have 100 billion on me. As expected, Hunter looked at Nico hesitantly. He said, Nico, how about you? I was afraid he would say some trash talk. So I stood up and pushed away the driver standing behind Hunter. I yelled, There are only 2 of them. Hurry. Hunter reacted and immediately turned around to grab the knife from the driver. The 2 men quickly wrestled with each other and the knife fell to the ground. I picked up the knife on the ground and cut the rope that bound me. Hunter pushed the driver to the ground and punched him hard in the face. The bodyguard not far away raised a gun at Hunter. I shouted, Be careful, and knocked Hunter to the ground as the gun went off. The gun hit my arm and blood spurted out. Nico screamed in fear, No. Hunter saw that I was injured and helped me up in disbelief. Nico yelled, What are you doing? This is just acting. How can you really shoot? The bodyguard and the driver looked at each other and said, I'm sorry, Nico. 200,000 is not enough compared to 200 million. Hunter finally understood and looked at Nico with a sullen face. Nico didn't dare to speak anymore and lowered his head sobbing. 21. The bullet penetrated my arm. It wasn't a fatal injury, but the continuous loss of blood caused my body temperature to drop rapidly and my consciousness became increasingly blurred. Hunter was somewhat moved by my selfless act to protect me. The evidence was that he tore off his own clothes and tried to tie me up to stop the bleeding, and also let me lie on his lap. I teased him, If I die, will you miss me as much as you miss Leo? He showed a rare hint of panic. After that, I fell into a coma, and when I opened my eyes again, I was lying in a hospital ward. I was not surprised that the impromptu kidnapping ended in such a mess. I guess the driver and bodyguard had left this world quietly. Nico looked at me with red eyes beside the bed and said angrily, What are you doing blocking bullets? You are so noble. I don't want to play with you anymore. After saying that, he lowered his head and shed 2 tears. Fortunately, you are okay. He left the ward without looking back. Not long after, Hunter came in with the nurse. Hunter apologized to me and said that this matter would affect Nico's reputation, so it would not be handed over to the sheriff's department or handled publicly. He hoped that I would not hold Nico accountable. He patiently observed my reaction, because after all, I was the only injured person in this dangerous farce. I don't care. I raised the corners of my mouth slightly and said softly, I'm glad you're okay. Hunter's expression suddenly changed, hesitation, fear, gratitude, and palpitations appeared on his face in turn. Owen had lost in front of me, but at this moment he suddenly had an epiphany, as if the situation was under control again, and he had the upper hand again. "You treat me." I didn't answer, just looked at him quietly. He got the answer from my silence, raised his eyebrows unconsciously, and the corners of his mouth regained the arrogant arc. He bent down and held my hand. "After you get the inheritance, you don't have to divorce." 22. For the next half-month, I returned to Hunter's family to recuperate, and Hunter didn't cause any more trouble. The old lady is very satisfied with the way Hunter and I get along now. She told me that I can tell at a glance that I am a blessed person. Hunter may play or make noise, but he always has me in his heart. Her purse became looser, and Hunter Company received several $100 million in working capital, which gradually brought some vitality back. Without talking about his private life, Hunter's devoted work is still quite attractive. When I get up to drink water at night, I often see him in the study or on the sofa in the living room, frowning and processing documents. He looks like the kind of career-oriented good man that appears in TV dramas. When he noticed that I stopped, he looked up to meet my gaze and smiled at me. By the way, he transferred $40 million to me and also gave me a watch as a gift. This surprised me. He would occasionally ask about the healing of my wounds, and occasionally help me relax my stiff muscles, showing some control and intimacy in his behavior. He began to feel at ease again. 23. The turning point came quickly and naturally. Hunter entered a susceptible period. Because of my injury, I stayed alone in the master bedroom for half a month, while Hans slept in the second bedroom next to the study. That morning, I was awakened by the strong cold spring pheromone, and when I looked up, I met Hunter's eyes. The moonlight outside the window is still cold. Hunter supported himself with his hands on my pillow. His face was red, his eyes were blurry, his breath was hot, and his aggressive pheromones kept drilling into my skin. I reached out to push him, but he held my hand, his muscles tensed, his strength several times greater than usual. He leaned over to me, beads of sweat from the tip of his nose dripping onto my collarbone. "You want to mark me?" I understood, and a smile appeared on my lips. He wanted to do everything while I had no resistance and hopefully get me pregnant. Afterwards he could attribute it to my susceptible period and apologize, thus having the best of both worlds? It's a pity that Alpha cannot mark Alpha. He is now controlled by his instincts and is at a disadvantage. I held the back of his head and kissed him, letting him bite my lips. I took out a tube of medicine from under the pillow and stabbed it into his neck. He fell down, snorting and looking at me with red eyes. I saw the obsession in his eyes and could no longer hold back the pheromones I had been suppressing for days. "What a coincidence, I'm also in a susceptible period," I said in his ear. 24. For 3 whole days, we bit and tangled with each other like trapped wild animals. Our pheromones collided back and forth in the air, and the smell coming out from the crack of the door was enough to make people retreat. No one dared to open the door, and food and water were placed by the door. It was not until the 4th day that I woke up from hunger and left Hunter to replenish our overconsumed bodies with some nutrients. Hunter regained consciousness after I fed him water. His first reaction was to escape, but he fell off the bed in a panic and sprained his thigh. I called my family doctor. Now all the ants in Hunter's family know what's going on between him and me. Hunter was still angry and hadn't been seen for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, he returned to Hunter's family villa and began to unconsciously stay in the same room with me, frequently touching my body, and seemed to have developed some attachment to me. He is pregnant. I accompanied him to the hospital for a checkup. When he got the report, he was confused at first, then he sighed deeply, as if he had accepted his fate. I didn't expect. He lowered his head and let me hold him in my arms. I actually walked out of Leo's world in this way. I looked at his white neck tenderly and bent down to kiss his slightly red ears. 25. Have you come out? But I don't want you to do that. 26. Hunter was pregnant, and my dad was very happy about it, so he lifted the ban on me and allowed me to continue filming. My assistant and agent came back with bags of gifts, including milk powder, bottles, toys, clothes, and diapers. They told me with a smile that they were for my family. I took the gift back to Hunter and conveyed the kindness of the people around me to him. Hunter looked a little stunned, but still accepted the gift and curled his lips sincerely. At night I hold him in my arms and release pheromones to lull him to sleep. Hormones are very scary things. Hunter has become more and more dependent on me both physically and mentally. Maybe because I am the father of his child, because of 100 billion, and because I like him too, I have the best of both worlds. It is natural that his feelings for me are deeper than those for others. So later he took the initiative to ask me for love, with soft eyes and deep affection. Marry first, fall in love later, and make the fake become real. Everything arrived in perfect condition. 27. Hunter is 4 months pregnant. I joined the crew for filming and will be staying in Xiangshan for a while. Hunter didn't want to, as he thought I should stay with him during my pregnancy, and he was afraid I would return to my old ways because I had a bad reputation. I comforted him, swore that I would never do something like cheating on my wife during pregnancy, and promised him that after the filming was completed, I would go home and accompany Hunter until the birth. But Hunter refused to give in. I showed him the actor's manual. Why do you have to worry? You know the Omega #1 who will be acting with me. He's your childhood friend. The manual described a male Omega of mixed race, with bright features and eyes as blue as the sea. Hunter blurted out, "Owen." He seemed relieved, but also seemed more worried. That night, I accompanied him for a long time, and generously whispered sweet words into his ears to coax him into agreeing to let me join the group. After all, the big show I arranged is still waiting for Owen to come to the finale. 28. On the eve of the start of filming, Hunter sent me to Xiangshan. The fact that he and I were getting married was known to everyone in the circle. Even so, the fact that an alpha was pregnant and inseparable from his former mortal enemy still shocked my agent, my assistant, and his childhood friend, movie star Owen. I haven't seen you for a few years. What are you doing? Owen stood in front of Hunter, looking down at his stomach, and unabashedly put his hands around his waist, as if measuring his waist. Hunter didn't stop. Omega was half a head shorter than Hunter. This action was like snuggling into his arms. Pheromones with the smell of papaya floated out faintly, blending seamlessly with the smell of Hunter's cold spring. You've gained weight. Hunter sneered at Owen's conclusion and raised his chin good-naturedly. Can't you see in 4 months? Oh my God, you can still get pregnant? Owen patted Hunter's chest and arm muscles, as if to confirm whether they were still there. After patting, he stood on tiptoe and put his arm around Hunter's shoulders. If I had known you had this ability, you would have given me a few babies. Hunter glanced at him and said, You've already transformed into an Omega. Forget about it. Owen punched Hunter twice with his fist, then turned his gaze to me. Excuse me, Jason, I grew up with Hunter, and I knew him well before we split. You don't mind my physical contact with him, do you? My eyebrows jumped, but I still smiled and said to him, How could that be? Hunter's friends are my friends. He won't. Hunter patted Owen's waist. But you, keep an eye on him on the set. He has too many romantic relationships. If you see him, please block him for me. Owen was stunned and put his hand down angrily. You want me to? Yes, Owen, aren't you two the official couple in the show? Hunter held his hand and said seriously, You have to follow him when he is resting, eating, and reviewing the script. I want you to be the only Omega around him during this period of time. Owen refused. He'll be annoyed. With pleasure. I gave him a compliment. Owen's acting skills are well known in the industry. He even won an award a while ago. I am very willing to learn from Owen. Owen's expression eased a little and he finally nodded. Hunter patted his shoulder and said, The child asked you to be his godfather. Well, take good care of my grandson. 29. After Hunter explained everything to Owen, he flew back with peace of mind. After all, he is a president. When I am not with him, he stays in the company. His family doctor and nurse are on call at all times. Fortunately, his pregnancy reaction is not severe. Because it was an alpha pregnancy, he had to take 3 progesterone injections a day, do a lot of tests, take a lot of nutritional supplements, and sometimes even have to have an 4 drip. During a crew dinner, the family doctor sent me a photo of Han's swollen calves and said that he was lacking pheromones and had been unable to sleep at night. I turned off my phone and watched the drunk Owen snatch the drink that Omega number 3 toasted to me. This is my brother's person. My brother's person is my person. I am protecting him. Don't even think about getting him drunk. Owen raised his head and drank the wine. He turned around and saw Omega number 2 squeezed next to me and almost sat on my legs. He immediately rushed over and sat on me, stretched out his hand to hook Omega number 2's chin. Hey, little thing, I take this place. Omega number 2's face fell. Jason, look at him. I saw Owen sitting unsteadily, so I put my arm around his waist and used him to shield the Omega. Sorry, I'm under Owen's care now. Owen's body stiffened, then softened and fell onto my chest, humming with what seemed like satisfaction. I saw someone not far away holding up his phone to take a photo. He raised the corner of his mouth and leaned his chin against Owen's neck inconspicuously. 30. After the dinner, the director and I asked for leave and bought tickets back to Beijing. When I entered Hunter's family villa, I specifically asked the housekeeper and aunts not to inform Hunter and just said I wanted to give him a surprise. Hunter was not in the master bedroom. I went around the rooms twice but still didn't see him. I asked the housekeeper, and he said Hunter hadn't gone out. I suddenly had an idea and went to the cloakroom. Hunter was indeed in the cloakroom, lying on top of a pile of clothes. Those were obviously my clothes, coats, shirts, and socks. Hunter made a nest out of those clothes and curled up in it, hugging a coat. His body fat percentage was not high, so his 6-month belly was already very obvious. Maybe his skin became sensitive. He changed his home clothes into silk ones, and his calves in his trouser legs looked swollen like carrots. I didn't expect him to build a nest, an alpha, building a nest because he was attached to the pheromones of another alpha. I walked gently to his side, staring at his haggard face, staring at his brows that were still furrowed even when he was sleeping. My chest ached slightly. Not surprisingly, I felt satisfied, but also filled with malice. Hunter! I called him. He opened his eyes dazedly, saw my face, and closed them again. He seemed to think I was hallucinating and did not move. I bent down, picked him up, and carried him to the bed. He finally woke up while semi-floating, raised his arms, wrapped them around my neck, stood up, and pressed his nose greedily against my neck. Then he smelled the papaya on me. 31. Hunter smelled Owen's pheromones on me and suddenly woke up. He looked up at me and his already lifeless face became even paler. What's wrong? I asked knowingly as I laid him on the bed, massaging his calves and releasing pheromones to soothe him. Are you staying with Owen today? I said calmly. Yes, you are a very loyal childhood friend. You blocked a lot of wine for me. Otherwise, I would not be able to come back to see you sober. Hunter was relieved. I saw that he was distracted and asked him mischievously, Are you jealous? His face suddenly looked like it had exploded with red pigment, and the exposed skin had turned a bright red. He moved his lips, as if he wanted to explain, but he quickly remembered that he was pulled out of my clothes, and anything he said now would only make things worse. So he said, Tisk. This is really rare. I bent down to kiss him. My body belongs to you alone. Do you want to check it out? 32. After checking for half the night, I released enough pheromones into Hunter and held him to sleep. The next morning he kicked me off the bed. He held up his cell phone, glared at me, and asked me to look at the screen. The screen showed the news of the day. The title was, Cast CP Turns Fake Play into Real Play. There was a question mark at the end and I couldn't see clearly what the content said. At the beginning, there was a photo. Owen was sitting on my lap and I was hugging Owen in an ambiguous and intimate posture with my chin resting on Owen's neck. Explain. Hunter was shaking with anger. It was taken at the dinner party yesterday. I yawned, scratched my hair and got up, still fearlessly hugging him. There should be someone on the left side of this photo. That person wanted to harass me, and he was acting as a shield for me. Hunter pushed me away. He's an Omega, and he wants to sit on you to block you? I frowned. What do you mean? This was the first time I gave him a cold shoulder after we got married. He was a little overwhelmed and looked a little panicked. I asked coldly, "Do you doubt us?" But I may be a scumbag, but I've never done anything like cheating on multiple women. And even if you doubt me, Owen is your childhood friend. You asked him to take care of me on the set. How could you think of him like this? Owen. Hunter caught the point. You called him Owen? Don't you call him Owen too? Hunter's voice suddenly rose. How long have I known him and how long have you known him? I started to have a headache and rubbed my temples twice. I was filming for 2 consecutive days. After the dinner, I took a 3-hour car ride and a 2-hour plane ride to come see you. It wasn't to listen to your nonsense. Hunter sensed the exhaustion and annoyance in my tone, and for a moment his emotions got out of control, his eyes turning red. I didn't coax him. I waited for him to calm down and then come over and hug me. I don't know what's wrong with me, I just feel very panicked. He explained, burying his head in the side of my neck. I looked down at him. His shoulders were thinner, his collarbone was clearer than before, and his neck drooped limply, looking unusually weak. You just have hormone disorder, so you have crazy thoughts. I released pheromones again to comfort him, and stroked his neck again and again. If you really mind, I will not have any contact with Owen other than work. Hunter shook his head slowly. I think too much. Then he added quietly, I wasn't like this before. 33. I made a table full of breakfast for Hunter, ate with him, wrote down the dishes that he ate a little more, taught the nanny how to cook them, and told her to make sure Hunter gained more weight. Hunter wanted me to accompany him to the prenatal checkup, but I refused on the grounds that the director was angry because I asked for leave. Before rushing back to the crew, I kissed his forehead and made an appointment to come back to see him as soon as I was free, and asked him to take good care of himself. He personally put a watch on me so that I would remember to go home on time. He is worried about gains and losses, but he can't bear to be cold to me when I take time to go home. As long as I start to coax him, he will let me pester him. I took good care of him, but often showed impatience with his questions. His mood was often polarized. He became more and more dependent on me. He couldn't sleep without me around and his hair fell out in clumps. He cried and asked me to quit the crew. When I refused, he smashed everything in sight. He saw the news about an actor getting injured on the set, so he asked for a lucky charm for me. As a result, Owen accidentally fell off his horse during the filming and injured his arm, so the lucky bead became Owen's. Hunter saw Owen lying on the hospital bed wearing the beads on the news, and finally couldn't bear it anymore, so he brought his nurse and doctor to Xiangshan. What he discovered in the ward made him even more devastated. Owen has my pheromones on him. I temporarily marked Owen. 34. The people in the ward were silent in front of his livid face. Owen stammered to explain to him that he suddenly had a fever on the set and the situation was urgent. The temporary marking was arranged by the director and done under the supervision of all the staff. Hunter punched him before he could finish. The scene became very ugly. 2 childhood friends, an alpha and an omega, were fighting over a man. It was a joke to anyone. Owen lost control and yelled, "You hit me? You hit me for him? You never hit me for Leo." I pulled Hunter into my arms. Hunter! He shuddered when I shouted at him and looked at me with red eyes. I sighed. Don't mess around, there's nothing wrong between Owen and me. Innocent. Hunter asked me, then burst into tears. He raised his phone and a voice carrying electricity came out of it. Owen, how about we give it a try? Me? Try what? Owen, our pheromones are compatible, why don't we solve it together? Don't worry, I only treat you as a good brother. Hunter is almost 8 months old now anyway, and doing anything with you will hurt his body. Then there was my laughter. In this recording, I neither agreed nor objected. Everyone was stunned. I pushed Hunter away and glared at him angrily. You're eavesdropping on me? Hunter didn't comment. Where did you put the bug? I looked down and saw the watch that Hunter would personally put on me every time before we went back to Xiangshan. I became furious and took off the watch and threw it to the ground. Glass shards flew everywhere, and Hunter took a half step back. I'm not doubting you. He stammered. I just think he'll do something. He's always done this before. Owen seized on this point and said, What do you think I would do? You and I are engaged. If you hadn't been messing around every day, What would I have done with other people? Hunter was shocked. He was afraid that I would be unhappy to hear the word engagement, so he quickly explained, it was a childhood thing, and the two families just talked about it as a joke. Bitch! Owen yelled, why didn't you say this when you were flirting with me? Is it others who are easy to bully? Is it Leo who is easy to bully? Hunter's face turned pale. How dare you mention Leo? You killed him. Owen was so angry that he grabbed a pillow and threw it at him. No. It's you. Owen yelled at the top of his lungs. Everything you are going through now is just what happened to Leo, and it's happening to you too. Hunter's lips froze as if he had been struck by lightning. He turned his head tremblingly, looked at my expression, and reached out to pull me up. I waved his hand away, showing a tired expression. I didn't expect you to be like this, Hunter. You disappoint me so much. Hunter's body trembled. The last trace of blood on his face faded away, and he looked like he was about to shatter. Is it painful? This is the ending I'm preparing for. Let's get a divorce after we get the inheritance. I said the last line. After the child is born, I will give you monthly child support. Hunter staggered as if struck by lightning and fell into the chair behind him. His face was pale and he was breathing rapidly. He grabbed his chest as if he couldn't breathe, and he just shed tears and his shoulders shook like a sieve. No, Jason, you can't. I turned around and was about to leave the ward when I suddenly heard a scream behind me. Blood! I looked back and found that Hunter had fainted, with a lot of blood oozing from between his legs. The scene in front of me awakened my memory. I was stunned for a moment, then immediately rushed over, picked him up, and ran to the emergency room. Doctor. 35. The hospital provided timely rescue and the child was saved. Hunter lay on the hospital bed with a deathly pale face, his eyes looking at the ceiling. The white quilt covered his stomach and legs. His exposed wrists were thin and blue veins could be seen on the back of his hands. I sat by his bed and peeled an apple for him. The apple peel was so long that a long strip hung out under the fruit knife. It's still there. Hunter suddenly spoke. I was stunned. What? Children, he said, and then added after a pause, without children, you won't get the inheritance. And we won't get a divorce. The fruit knife tilted and cut my thumb. I looked at the blood beads oozing from my fingertips and began to get anxious. Do you love me? I asked him. Hunter's eyes turned red and he stuttered. You are telling me this now? How strange. I interrupted him. You fall in love because of hormones, because of a unique encounter, because of similar looks, because of saving your life. It's so easy for you to fall in love with someone, but you always make a big fuss about it. Movies can't show you such a deep love, but your love is always full of weighing the pros and cons. You get tired, you seek novelty, you fall in love with someone else. You are obviously heartless, but you always like to pretend to be a passionate person who loves life and death. Hunter was stunned, tears gathered on his eyelashes and did not fall. If you had told Leo from the beginning that you just wanted to have fun. I stabbed the knife in the peeled apple and handed it to Hunter's mouth. He wouldn't have died. A flash of lightning flashed through Hunter's mind, and my features became extremely clear in front of him. He asked, "Who is Leo to you?" I met his eyes and answered, "Brother." All expression disappeared from his face. 36. This is a classic tragedy. The young man from a wealthy family hid his identity and fell in love with a little beta from the slums. This relationship started with hormones running rampant, flourished in their mutual support, but eventually inevitably ended in withering. The two were deeply in love when they were alone in a foreign country, but the rich boy always had to return to his own circle, and little beta gradually lost the person who supported his entire world, and his spirit declined day by day. With Hunter's good family background and good looks, there is never a shortage of choice partners around him, whether they are friends in the same circle, or the cousin who secretly embarrasses Leo, or the childhood friend who has been engaged to him in the adult's joke. At that time, Leo followed Hunter back to China for their love. He had already gambled everything, so he was worried about gains and losses and was a little sensitive and cowardly. Because he had seen Hunter in love with all his heart, Leo quickly noticed Hunter's wandering. Hunter would be away from home for half a month, would lie about working overtime to attend singles parties in his circle, would choose to accompany his sick cousin on his birthday, and would cuddle with his childhood friend Owen after getting drunk. After half a year of trying for the relationship, Leo found out that she was pregnant. He stopped struggling and told Hunter about it, wanting to give himself and Hunter another chance. Hunter didn't seem happy when he heard the news, but he still put in a lot of effort and took good care of Leo. But the fundamental conflict between the two was not resolved. Hunter was growing impatient. She said that she had been with him for 4 years and had never done anything to let him down. She said that she had been under tremendous pressure and that even if he had nothing, she wanted to be with him until the end. He said that he couldn't let Hunter's family be defeated by him. "Where else can you find someone better than me? If you hadn't met me, you wouldn't be with some drunk, robber, drug addict, or homeless person in the slums now." Leo was completely disappointed. It turns out that Hunter never felt he was worthy of it. After he calmed down, he didn't even want to say a single extra word to Hunter. He just pulled his hand back and left. But when the two met again, Leo had turned into a handful of ashes. The abortion went wrong and he died in his hospital bed. 37. Hunter was distraught. "Impossible, Leo is an orphan. He has no brother. He is a bastard child. My father was a young man who was having a casual affair with an Omega. His mother sent a letter before she died, and I received it. I am the only one who knows of his existence." Hunter's eyes were red. "Why don't you take him home? You can achieve the right result, right?" I don't know what expression I showed, probably because it was so ironic that Hunter swallowed the second half of his sentence. It is indeed you who is hopeless. Never feel that the fault lies with you." After Leo left, Hunter drank every day for the first 3 months until he had stomach bleeding. In the 4th month, he drove into the sea. In the 5th month, he took sleeping pills and was sent to have his stomach washed. The old lady cried in the hospital. He stopped torturing himself and started looking for substitutes one after another. He thought he and Leo were in love, but Leo was so determined to leave him that he was not hesitant to abort their child and throw away his own life. Perhaps he was ready to withdraw, but suddenly a hole was dug in his chest, with flesh and bones attached. From then on, what fell on him was more like a funeral banner than a white moonlight. "You did it on purpose." He finally calmed down. He recalled the pain he felt then, and wondered which was worse. He seemed to have died right there, and when he came back to life, his face was filled with a cold, dead look. "You come to avenge him." "Same revenge." I said nothing, and watched the cold fire burning in his eyes. "Jason, I won't let you have your way." 30. Hunter left Xiangshan. I don't know what he did, but Owen was exposed to more than a dozen scandals of interfering in other people's relationships. He was insulted by the entire internet to the point of emotional breakdown, and he retired from the entertainment industry before he even left the hospital. The drama had to be temporarily replaced halfway through filming, and the entire crew cooperated to reshoot the scenes, and it was dark again for a while. My assistant didn't know what happened, but guessed that Hunter was very angry. He asked me to take a few days off to comfort him, saying that if Hunter got too angry, he might abort the baby. I told my assistant that it was okay and I continued to reshoot. Later, all the staff looked at me as if they were hesitant to speak. The director said, "Jason, I find that you are actually quite cold-blooded." I blinked and smiled at him. "You just realized it." The filming was completed in a month. Just after the filming was finished, news of a shocking change came from Shangjing. First, the old lady in Hunter's family was critically ill and was admitted to the hospital. Second, Hunter delivered the baby by cesarean section on the same day the old lady was admitted to the hospital. The baby was a healthy boy at 36 weeks. 39. I didn't see the old lady for the last time, and I was not allowed to enter Hunter's family villa again. Hunter's attorney brought me the divorce agreement. I want to discuss the divorce with Hunter, and I won't sign unless he is there in person. The lawyer made a phone call and then took me to Hunter's company. Still in the president's office, Hunter seemed to be trying his best to eliminate the impact of childbirth on himself. He didn't even observe the confinement period. With a pale face, dressed in a suit and tie, he sat behind the desk with his back straight. He still looked like that dead business elite, with his hands clasped, looking at me coldly. But there was a crib behind him, and in the gauze curtain, a small figure was waving his hands and feet. For a moment, I didn't know how to start. I didn't expect you to give birth anyway. 100 billion. Hunter sneered, I can't afford to give it up for your sake. I nodded and asked, did you ask the old lady to change her will? Yes, she wanted a child so badly. I brought a lawyer to her bedside to notarize her entire estate, designating me as the sole heir. You have nothing to do with it. I guess Hunter has been thinking about saying this to me for a long time. He looked arrogant, as if he had been patient for more than a month, waiting for today's turnaround. He wanted to see me get nothing and be defeated miserably. He would laugh at my trivial revenge and false justice. He wanted me to know that he hadn't lost anything. Neither Leo nor I could shake him. But he doesn't understand that I was never for justice. An alpha, also a breeder, my enemy, yet he gave birth to my bloodline. He didn't know how indescribable it was for me to see him sitting there. You'd better not do this. I gently advised him, we had an agreement before, you take 70% and I take 30%. He raised his lips and said, go away. So I rushed over, grabbed the back of his head in front of the lawyer, and kissed him fiercely. He was stunned because he saw me grinning with 8 teeth showing and my facial muscles twisted with laughter. I told him, it's not over yet. 40. First of all, the old lady's 100 billion inheritance is actually negative. She only has a few hundred million in cash left in her account. Secondly, Hunter inherited all the old lady's estate and also inherited all her debts. Again, Hunter's family received favors from the Dew family many years ago, and it was all written down in black and white, and the money had already grown into a very large sum. Once again, all the assets of Hunter's family were integrated to pay off 70% of the debt. If he wants to keep it all for himself, he will go bankrupt. In addition, personal bankruptcy will not affect spouse and children. I will still be Jason, and Hunter will become a person of bad faith. This is the end. 41. Hunter thought of many ways to delay the downfall of Hunter's family. He had sold everything that could be sold, and he couldn't borrow any money. He suddenly found that he not only had no relatives but also no friends. He was too exhausted to file for divorce with me. On the day Goose went bankrupt, I bought Hunter's family villa and had someone bring him back. He had no other choice. He had lost everything and people were coming to him for debt every day. To outsiders, it seemed like the couple was just transferring their property from one hand to the other, but only the person involved, Goo, knew how it felt. He also wanted to work a few more jobs to show off his backbone. But I put him under house arrest. He was still in charge of taking care of the child, and the nurse, family doctor, and the nanny I hired were still around him, but his cousin had to report to me if he wanted to see him, and whenever he walked to the door of Hunter's family villa, he would be politely turned away by 3 bodyguards in black. He has quarreled, made a scene, and struggled, but I have 10,000 ways to make him fulfill his husbandly duties. Until he remembered that was what he had done to Leo. He finally despaired. This is a perfect revenge. Jason and Leo's brotherly love is touching. He half lay on the sofa in the living room, his 2 long legs slanted, clapping his hands and praising me. What are you going to do next? Let me die in an accident or die of stomach cancer. It seems like I really should do that. But Leo is not dead. Hearing this, Hunter immediately sat up, his eyes wide open. The child is indeed gone. He faked his death to get rid of you. I watched his expression intently. I sent him back abroad. He married a university teacher. I gave him the gift money last month. Hunter closed his eyes twice, tears rolling down his cheeks. He covered his face and cried bitterly. I let him cry for 20 minutes. His voice became hoarse and he looked at me with his eyes red from tears. Can I see him again? He said he would never see me again in this lifetime. Hunter gasped for air and sobbed. After a moment he asked me, "Why did you tell me?" I said to him, "Actually, I was the first person to see you playing the guitar." I asked him to send the 100 yuan and the bouquet of flowers. Hunter's sobs paused, the 2 chokes coming out strange. I added, "I took the initiative to propose this engagement to the old lady. She agreed because she believed I could be your other half." Hunter couldn't believe it and asked, "Do you love me?" "I'm not sure. I'm a sociopath." I smiled at Hunter. "I saw you snatching a chicken leg at a banquet when I was 12. It's a rare moment that I'm impressed by someone." Hunter gasped. "Jason's life is a play, it's all acting." I hugged him tightly. "What exactly is love?" "I'm not sure either. I was interested in you, so I gladly accepted my brother's request for revenge. In exchange, he signed an agreement to give up his inheritance. My love and hate for you may all come from my imitation of Leo, but what I can be sure of is that you do make me have all kinds of feelings, good and bad, which is really interesting." Hunter didn't know how to respond for a long time. He just said, "Fuck you. I don't need you to love me. You will only love yourself forever." I put my fingers into his palm and interlocked our fingers. "But I will tie you to me. That way you won't be able to harm others." 42. Selfish, cruel, irresponsible, deceitful, manipulative, unscrupulous, and contemptuous of life. It's me. I was born in high places, and without my mother I would be worse off than I am now. I take great care of Leo, but I also tell him clearly not to reveal my existence to outsiders, and I will not give him the opportunity to compete for the family business. I treat every lover I have well, because without them I would not be so human. I can play a variety of roles skillfully and I am capable of dealing with daily emotional reactions, but the evil in my heart must have a place to go. There are many forms of love in this world. I love the feeling of breaking Hunter into pieces, then squeeze him and myself together, even if the result is only a weird-looking thing. 43. You're a scumbag. The same to you. You're disgusting. I wish I could disgust you forever.